Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another week of our weekly shows. This week we are discussing how to promote horse racing. And we have an expert panel here with us this week. I'm delighted to have them here. We have Rob Hartnett, CEO of Sport for Business, Noel Hayes, such a successful owner over the years, both in the National Hunt and the Flat Field. And we have Daniel Kübler, very talented trainer in the UK, all with different perspectives, all with a unique take on our great game. And we're going to discuss that over the course of this evening's chat and just tease out where we can grow this great sport. I think it's really interesting to hear what you say. As always, we have our Q&A function. You can click on that at any point, ask a question of the guys. I'm sure they'd love to answer them. There's loads to discuss, and I think we should just kick off right away. Rob, if I was to start with you, to describe your journey and how you became CEO of Sport for Business and what you do in that role and how horse racing has been part of that journey for you.
Sure. Thanks very much for the invitation to appear, Jack, and hello, everybody. My journey in racing goes all the way back about 3 generations. My grandfather, Jack Barrett, was a national hunt jockey, and he was head feed man out in Darky Prendergast yard out in the Curragh. His father before him rode the winner of the Derby and the Oaks Double in 1915. So my pedigree is all right. I then, when I graduated from UCD, I went over to the UK and ended up working in public relations, and then ended up working in Ladbrokes, and then Corals as their man out on the racecourse, and then at the Tote as their director of sponsorship and public relations, and had the privilege, humbling privilege, of managing the sponsorship of the Gold Cup at Cheltenham over a number of years before coming back to Ireland, initially staying in the gambling world with Dermot Desmond on his Betdac operation. And then in 2011, I decided that in the midst of recession, it was a great time to start a business. So I formed Sport for Business, hence the reason of becoming CEO. Nobody else would employ me as a CEO, but I would myself. And what we do is that we build bridges between sport and business. So it's a membership operation. We've got a cohort of members ranging from all of the major sporting bodies, from the GAA and the IRFU, the FAI, Horse Racing Ireland, all of those. We've got the government through the Department of Sport on board, and all of the major sponsors as well. So everybody in a horse racing context, from Paddy Power through to William Fry, through to all of the main sponsors that would be across all of the different sports. Horse racing remains a love of mine. It's only a part of what we do, so we work across all of the different sports now in a variety of ways. But I still love racing, and I'm still hankering after the idea that I'll get back to the Cheltenham Winners enclosure, but leading in a horse as opposed to just handing over a pot next time around.
I'm sure there's some men on the chat this evening that would be gladly able to assist you with that pursuit. But I suppose I want to get a sense from you, Rob, because it's great to have you on tonight, because I think you could give a real perspective to the discussion. And where would you see horse racing within the sporting landscape of Ireland and perhaps the UK right now?
I think it's got a different place within the sporting landscape, and I think that one of the attractions of racing plays well because it counters one of its disadvantages. Sport, for the most part, if you think about Anfield, or you think about Twickenham, or you think about the Olympics in a huge big stadium environment, a large part of the appeal there is very tribal. It's very passionate. It's very much, me against you. And while horse racing is the same as that, we don't have teams as such. We don't have, for the most part anyway, teams of people flying over wearing, Aidan O'Brien shirts and scarves. I know it's come around a little bit, but it's not for the most part. So it's more of a cerebral pursuit. And I think that if we understand that, and if we work towards attracting fans and people in towards thinking that this is something which can live way beyond the 90 seconds of a horse race, or the 10 minutes it takes to run a big long steeplechase. And it gets into the fact of looking at pedigrees, of looking at form, at looking at things whereby you can actually sort of try and work out the puzzle. I love that idea of it. It's something that you can actually have more of an invested nature about it than sport. Like if I go along and I support Liverpool or Manchester United or the Irish rugby team or anything like that, it's me on the outside and it's them on the inside. Whereas with the sport of racing, for the sake of a bet, I have as much of an ownership in my own mind as Sheikh Mohammed or as Rich Ritchie has in the horse that's actually running. I'm cheering probably a little bit louder. And even though the rewards might not be as great, it's something visceral that you actually feel about it. The other element is that sense of style and the social side of it. We know that, at Galway races, for example, half of the audience are there to look good, half of them are there for the crack, and then the other half, because Galway does throw logic out the window, is there for the actual racing itself. But if you look at that, if you look at the cerebral part and if you look at the style part of it, I think that's where we're a little bit different, and different is good, because sport is a many splendid thing, but it takes up an awful lot of time. We didn't realize how much until it was all taken away from us over the last 3 months. And you need to stand out a little bit in order to get under the skin and into the minds of those who are going to be our future and indeed our present racegoers.
And I think that's really interesting. And Dan, I'd like to turn to you, because Rob has been talking about that cerebral element to it. And a lot of people, I think, that are perhaps watching in tonight or watch back on YouTube, and they're not from a racing background and they feel intimidated about getting involved. And here you are, Dan, a racehorse trainer, the very epicenter of what it is to be involved in this great sport. And you have no background, you have no familial background in horse racing.
Yeah, I mean, almost the complete opposite of Rob. Absolutely no pedigree whatsoever. I'm an outlier here on that front. And I think something that is pretty unusual in the sport to some degree. But I would kind of echo, I think what Rob's there, he's really picked on those points where, any sport business or something needs to have a sort of a unique to stand out and different from other pursuits that people can follow, whatever that may be. And just to introduce myself a bit, I sort of grew up was born in South Africa, but grew up in sort of suburban England, and had an interest in horses in that my family originally hails from Switzerland, and we used to go back there in the sort of, the summers, and I used to ride a bit there, and I enjoyed it. But for me, racing was something that happened on Grandstand, as it was then, on Saturday afternoon, and sort of Channel 4 a little bit, and I watched it a bit with no real huge interest, if it was on, and that's what I watched. But in the same way I would watch a rugby match that was on, or a football match, or anything like that. And I then, when my father passed away sort of in my last year at school, and I wasn't quite sure where I wanted to go in the world and whatever, so I just worked locally, saved a bit of money, and went traveling, and ended up working for a guy out in Australia, backing young horses, out on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. And he was the guy who sort of said to me, he said, look, if you enjoy doing this and you like working with horses, the only kind of in as a realistic way of making a living is to get involved in racing. And then I started to look at racing in a different light. And it was, for me, it was the love of the horse, and being able to, work with horses, which is something I really enjoyed, being around the horses and that whole challenge of developing a young horse. And then I could see that in racing, and I sort of really started to get into racing then, and starting to understand developing horses. And, I came back to England and went through the racing school to start with, and worked for a trainer for a bit, and then went and did a degree in equine and agricultural business management, and just kind of gradually built up my experience in the industry. But it is kind of a difficult industry to break into, because a lot of it is kind of who you know and not what you know. That's not fair, but it certainly helps if your father can introduce him to, or your sister knows someone, and all of that, to sort of break down those barriers to be able to get given the opportunities. But at the same time, it's an industry I've found that if you work hard and, you know, when you do get the chance, people are willing to give you the chance and develop you. And, you know, I've had some very good mentors along the way and people who've helped me, you know, sort of get to where I am. I'm very lucky to have met some of the people I've met. And I think one of the great things about racing are the people involved. And I think as a sport, you know, the interaction between the participants and the public, and I think especially with social media and some of the opportunities there, we're able to engage much more directly in some ways. And because there's a huge variety of people, I mean, it's relatively easy to have a discussion with a racehorse trainer in comparison to, say, a football manager, and things like that. So I think that's another point, and that whole cerebral pursuit. And I really love that puzzle, the puzzle of racing. And I think everyone who works within racing in some facet, they're all trying to solve this puzzle. If you're a breeder, it's how do I breed a really good horse? You know, if you're a pinhooker, how do I find the horse that's going to make the profit? What do I have to do to unlock that thing? You know, ultimately, you know, I'm trying to work out how do I take this horse and get the absolute best from this horse. So I think that really is something that's unique to racing. And then I think as a sport, we are, I like the word style. I think, again, that was a good word, but it is a bit more relaxed when you go racing. It's a different environment to a lot of sporting events. You know, there's less intensity to it in a way, or it's a different kind of intensity. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I'm really intrigued by what you're saying about a puzzle. And you know, I think, Noel, if I was to come to you, you're a man who's solved a puzzle that a lot of people think you need a big checkbook for, and that is having a Cheltenham Festival winner, and you had it with, you know, unfortunately the ill-fated Connor, subsequent to your involvement. But you paid $4,500 for our Connor, and you and the Man About Town syndicate. I won't ask Noel if you were in fact the Man About Town that it was named after. But I suppose your attraction to the game and how you feel it should be promoted when you think about horse racing.
Yeah, Jack, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me on board this evening, Jack. It's a very interesting topic. I suppose with our Connor, just to touch on it briefly, like in essence and in practical terms, we won the lotto. You know, we certainly didn't think that when my dad actually bought the horse, I lay claim to it because he's also Noel Hayes. So when you search the results, it says Noel Hayes, but my dad actually bought the horse. And we syndicate him between a few close family friends, and which look with great crack, you know. But you'd go skint trying to do it again if you were trying to get in at that sort of a bracket. You know, we were very lucky. I think both Rob and Dan have touched on something incredibly interesting in terms of how they've categorized racing, and it's the cerebral element, and it's the idea of racing can appeal to the intellect. And when we're talking about promoting racing, it's one of the things I noted earlier on as I was preparing for this evening. I was just reviewing some notes that I had made myself, and it's that there's a possibility that we fail to treat the clientele of racing as you know, as intellects, and that we kind of tend to dumb it down a little bit for them. And you know, I think if we were to step back from racing and look at, I suppose, compare racing to whether it be rugby or golf or Premier League or any of the, even NFL, if we were to go back 25 years and look where each of them stood alongside each other, for me, racing is the one sport that hasn't progressed at the same level as those other sports. Sky Sports have a lot to do with this. They introduced data, analytics and insights for the customer. So when you're sitting at home on your couch, and whether you're watching golf or NFL or whatever, you're being bombarded with analysis and you know, high level thinking and insights and data. But that doesn't exist in horse racing. Horse racing hasn't moved in step with that. And I guess the reason why that is that how is the media around horse racing controlled? So 25 years ago, you had to get the Irish Independent, the Irish Times or the Evening Press, whatever happened to be, to see what was on in racing. But as digital media and social media has become more prevalent in terms of how people access their news, what has happened in racing is that the media is now essentially controlled by the bookmaking firms to their own end. So the trade paper Racing Post is essentially, it has changed its business model to a betting affiliate in the last number of years. Racing TV at the races, whilst we might pay a subscription to them, it's essentially funded through betting and betting related activity. So what happens is that the consumer on the other end isn't actually getting the intellectual conversations attached to the sport that they should, and those stimulating conversations that would help generate the interest at a personal level for the viewers at home. For me, that's a bit of a misstep. I mean, we still don't have, we look to America and other jurisdictions where they have full sectional timing available, and it becomes a point of analysis around racing. I think Ireland was supposed to have introduced sectional time in January 1st, 2017, never introduced. It's rarely ever spoken about, and I would certainly at the time have heard some commentary of question of what use that is to the consumer. Well, the reality is if you provide that sort of data and information that allows the consumer to build relationships with the sport, stimulate the intellect, and go from there. Like, if we think back to pre-Cheltenham, I think all of us here that watch racing, and many people here that watch racing, will have seen Lydia Hislop on Racing TV did a course walk with Ruby Walsh around Cheltenham. And it was probably the best bit of insight around racing that I have seen in TV for quite a number of years. And the reason being, and the general feedback that you would have seen from commentary on social media and that around that, was that it was intellectually stimulating. You were now being treated as somebody that's intelligent, rather than the narrative that seems to prevail because of the way media is controlled by betting organizations. They want you to be reactive and place a bet. They don't want you to think on your own 2 feet and think about racing. So there's been a massive divergence in how consumers, there's been a massive change in how consumers consume sport. Racing has failed to move in step with that. And for me, it's kind of possibly held us back, but also racing needs to benchmark itself against other sports now. And that also in turn presents the opportunity for the future of horse racing, is to get into the data, get into the analytics, and treat customers as intellect. Because as Dan and Rob said there, it's a cerebral element, and it's the stimulation of the mind. And treating people as intellects, enhances your relationship with them and allows them to get further involved into the sport.
And I would have to totally echo what Noel is saying about treating people as intellectual. Here we are on the eve of the return of the Irish flat season to my favourite racecourse, Naas Racecourse. And I'd like to turn to you, Rob, because the Six Nations this year, they partnered with Amazon Web Services, and what we saw from that was a hugely rich data set being published after every game. And what that gives journalists is it gives them a way to change the narrative. You have them talking about dominant tackles, you have them talking about meters gained, you have them talking about the GPS that's placed on every player. Like, for me, if you were giving me in charge of Irish racing tomorrow, I would have a camera on every jockey, and the owner could access it the next day and actually watch the ride as opposed to the race that's happening before them. There's so much opportunity in this area. And for you, and you're the perfect man to ask these questions, you are talking about business and sport and how they cooperate together. What would you see as the opportunity in that space, picking up on what Noel is saying and involving data more in this sport, as here we are in this unique year where we need to bring the sport more to life than ever before?
It is. It's very interesting to hear Noel there talking about how the sport hasn't progressed. And you're absolutely right. Like, when I was lucky at the time that I was over in the Totion in the UK, there was 2 things in particular that I was involved in. One was putting the advertising and the sponsorship on jockeys' breeches. And I can remember being up at Newmarket and Sandown and doing site tests and trying to figure out how big it should be and how wide it should be and everything else. And it was revolutionary at the time. And then probably within a year of that, I was involved in the British Horse Racing Authority on the committee that was talking about introducing Sunday racing. Now, it seems bizarre now in 2020 to actually be talking about Sunday racing as not having previously existed. But the point that you were making there about dumbing it down as well, God, we had such debate and argument and frustration around the fact that there was one half of racing that was giving out and saying that all we wanted to do was put bouncy castles in there, and it would upset the horses and it would take away the integrity of the sport. And then you had the other half that was saying, well, no, you can only really put on low-grade racing. You definitely wouldn't want to put on a Group 1, or you wouldn't want to put on the best there, because the kind of people that we're going to be attracting won't really know the difference. And that's exactly right. That's treating our consumers, treating the people who are coming in and paying through the gate or watching it on the television or following on social media as being in some ways, juvenile or infantile, that they couldn't actually get it. I'd love to have seen today's 1,000 guineas over in Newmarket. I'd love to have seen the difference in the speed between what Love did in the final furlong as to what she did in the 4th furlong and what she did in the 6th furlong. There's this assumption that actually they're winding themselves up and then they go hell for leather through the final bit of it. But of course that's not the case. It's that other horses are tiring. But we never get to understand that. We never get to see that. And you're right, Amazon Web Services came in with the Six Nations. I was there when Accenture came in with RTE and BBC 6 years ago now, 7 years ago maybe, and they were the first sponsors of it. And it was bringing data. None of this is new. Like, I'm a big fan of NFL in America, and US sport is absolutely dominated by passing yards and by, the amount of gain that, the teams get on average to get towards their first down. It's a sport which thrives on data, even though it's very physical and very big impact. We have all of that data, or we should have all of that data, which just makes it more understandable, because I'll never get to understand what it felt like to be Ryan Moore as she kicked on today. But I remember back in the day in the Phoenix Park here in Dublin when we had Steve Cawthon and we had Cash Asmussen and all of these jockeys coming from America, and they would run race in their heads. And you'd always imagine that they just they had that clock in their mind that knew exactly what they were doing. And we never get to see that. We never get to feel that. We never get to have a real understanding about what's happening in the course of the race. So treat us like the problem is that we're maybe trying to reach out to going back towards having television audiences of 11 and 12 million for the Grand National and for the Derby. That doesn't happen anymore. Like, everything is carved down into niches now, and you're appealing to the audience who are going to give you a payback on your investment in them. So it becomes a virtuous circle. Speak to the customers as though you really want them to come back, and they will feel that, and they will want to come back, and they will want to get engaged. They will become our champions out there. We can't replicate what it's like to score the winner in the 92nd minute of a Champions Cup final or anything like that for a team that you've supported through your mother and father and your grandparents before that. Ours tends to be on a more moment-by-moment basis. But for heaven's sake, let's just explain it so much better. And we do have this moment. I love the screen. Opportunity knocks. Like, I would be more into National Hunt than I would into the flash race. And the Guineas kind of landed on me this week. I'm looking forward to the Curragh next weekend as well. And of course, to Naas tomorrow. But the real thing about it, like, I sat down and I watched the 2,000 guineas yesterday. I watched the 1,000 guineas today. And we have this lovely narrative. It's like you're spinning around in a circle and the race finishes and you're spun out, but they're already spun into the next circle. So, what will Love do? Will Love go for the Oaks? Will Kemco go for the Derby? The way that Love ran today and won today, I'd love to see her eventually in the season, whether it be in the Eclipse or whether it be ideally in the Irish Champion Stakes, coming out as a 10 furlong horse and going toe to toe with the boys as well. And I thought, like, it was a spectacular performance today. 1-0 for Ireland in this sort of battle of already getting back out into it. And I just think that we're not doing enough. And now we have an opportunity where there is no football, there is no rugby, there is no Gaelic games. The audience for ITV and for Virgin Media over this weekend, it'd be really interesting to look at those and compare them to what it was like last year. The German football came back, doubled the television audience. And we've got to be able to hold it. We've got to be able to present them something which makes them say, I want to follow that story. I want to follow that narrative and get to know those individuals.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point, Rob. And I think it's, you've talked about sectionals. And actually, if you looked at Cameco ran the fastest guineas ever yesterday. What an extraordinary news story. And actually, what's really interesting about it is his slowest furlong was his last furlong. So what you were watching was not horses increasing their speed. It was them actually getting slower as they got to the line. That's fascinating analysis when people get into the depth of it. It's something we don't talk about enough. And, I opened up the BBC Sport website this morning, and what did I see? I didn't see Cameco, and notwithstanding what a wonderful ambassador Oisin Murphy is, I saw the Bundesliga. and I saw follow the Bundesliga live, and that's a little bit depressing to me as a massive racing fan and someone that really wants to promote our sport. But Dan, I want to turn to you, because what Rob has been talking about is data and how we're hiding the data behind this great sport, and you use it as a modern trainer. You use it a lot in what you do every day.
Yeah, I mean, we would analyse. I get more information from my horses training up on the gallops than I do when they run on a race course. That's a ridiculous state of affairs.
And why is that, man? Why would you get more information? Are you using particular technology?
Because I use a system called Equinity that records stride length, heart rate, speed and sectionals. So, we'll gallop our horses and you can use it every day, but I tend to use it when we do fast work, when, that's when you get the most information, unless there's a particular reason for wanting to look at a recovery, maybe on a horse that you're thinking about stepping up in his work or something. But, and we get that information, and that helps us choose which path to take a horse. We can analyze a stride length. Is this a 6 furlong horse or a miler? We can start to break down and get some idea, and it's another piece of that puzzle, putting that horse together and getting all that information. And even simple things like, if I'm watching a piece of work and I think, oh, they finished a bit slow there, what's gone on, I can look back and say, okay, well, the guys went pretty hard in the middle there. They're finishing tired. They've probably overdone it, or wow, that's finished like Pegasus. And then you look back and you think, well, they've gone very slow the first 2 furlongs, so it's not really a particularly testing piece of work. So don't read too much into it. And all of that information helps me. My horses go and run on a track, and I don't have any of that information unless, certain tracks now they have it and you can get that information. But wouldn't it be fascinating for the person following the sport to have that information? It's starting to come more here. I think TPD have got involved with more and more tracks, and that can only be a good thing. And it's starting to come a little bit more in the the media and stuff. I think you mentioned Oisin Murphy on Racing TV today. He won on John Gosling's filly in the Pretty Polly. And he gave a fantastic description when he got off the horse, and he knew that, and he explained to the viewer why he thought this horse wasn't an Oaks filly. And part of it was to do that she was slowing a lot in those last 2 furlongs, and he stole the race from, by effectively going hard early. And Angus McNay in the studio, fortunately, was able to pull up the sectionals and say, yeah, what Oisin said is backed up by the times. And that's the kind of analysis and things that I think people are interested in. And I had a friend who was watching. He was obviously watching on ITV, and he's just a fan of the sport. Guy I went to university with, but no sort of professional involvement. And I don't know what they were doing on ITV, but he just texted. I just got a message saying, "Can you imagine them explaining what a corner is in football during the middle of, And that's the issue. And you both touched on it, Noel and Rob. So I'm just kind of repeating that here, but it's a sort of example of it. But I've had a guy who used to work for me, and he was fascinated with Formula One and all the data and the coverage and all of that there. And I wouldn't have said he was a sort of the brain of Britain. He was a good rider, but he certainly wasn't an academic type or in any way that. But he was fascinated by it all and really into following Formula One. And a lot of his conversation when he talked about it was to do with data. And that's not necessarily someone, as you say, I don't think we need to dumb the sport down, explain it for what it is and let people enjoy it, and don't sort of oversimplify things. People are able to follow and process quite complex data if they're interested in something.
Can I just come in with one point on that there, Jack? I love what you're talking about, that, exactly that. You're not a nerd if you're interested in the data and the technology. One of the things that I found fascinating over the last couple of weeks is that there's a company here up in Newry, Stat Sports, and they do all of the GPS tracking technology, which is on footballers. Now, like horse racing is a sport which has been based on time and numbers and data and things since forever. Football wasn't, but it's an example of how football has taken over. They were able to run tests on training and on historical data, which showed that the average footballer is in close contact with his opposition player for 3.3 seconds. And then they ran a similar one on GAA and Gaelic football, and they said that it was 2.3 seconds, that they're within a 2-metre exclusion zone. This is real data, which is actually helping to inform the debate about when we come back into contact sport. And this is from two sports who 20 years ago, when we had an opportunity to start introducing sectional timing, would have absolutely thrown out with the bathwater any idea that numbers like that could make a factor. So we've got this inherently in our DNA, it's built in, and we're just not tapping into it. We're not getting it out there.
I actually saw that data, Rob, and I thought to myself, I hope to God the Kildare footballers do a much better job than spend only 2 seconds beside whoever they're marking in the championship this year. But I think it's important we also, acknowledge tackling perception. And, I think for me, there's 3 buckets. There's the horse racing is for an older generation, horse racing is too elitist, and horse racing has welfare issues. They're the 3 things. Now, I think they're perception issues. I think in terms of elitism, I think it's the only sport in the world where you can spend a couple of €100 and you could be a prime actor in the sport by being an owner, being involved in the syndicate. I think it's not too, I think older generation, I actually think our discussion today shows that there is such a rich depth of tapestry there for someone that wants to get involved and be engaged in this sport, that I actually think it's very attractive to young people, and especially it's in short, sharp bursts, perfect for limited attention spans on social media. And thirdly, the welfare issue, to be honest, we're the most regulated animal activity in the world. Our horses have wonderful life outcomes as a result. But Noel, I'd be really interested to hear your perspective on this, because I know you see it on Twitter just like I do. People have issues with horse racing and they don't love it as much as we do. How would you tackle those perceptions?
Well, on welfare, Jack, I would be very much in the camp of Kevin Blake, who has talked about this quite a bit. People who understand what happens in racing understand the standards that are set. People who don't understand are not seeking to understand, so therefore trying to cede to them means that there's only one person moving from their position, and that's weakening racing's position in my view. So the standards are very high. They have always been very high, and they will continue to be very high. Make peace with that and stop apologizing to people who really don't, they're not seeking to understand. They're having a one-way conversation. In terms of the elitism, racing is fascinating because of all the high-profile sports. It is amazing that we have access to the key players. So I don't know who said it earlier on. We could have a Twitter conversation with Ger Lyons this evening as an example, or Johnny Murtagh this evening for an example. And if in my lifetime in this industry, any time that a trainer or a jockey is asked to assist in some way to promote or further the sport, they've always said yes. Whether it be to go on a panel at the races, to go on the radio, to make themselves available for charity events, it's always yes. And racing probably does a good job of the fact that it has such good and close access to these people. You also hit the nail on the head in terms of accessibility. I don't think people realize the opportunity that you're presenting to them, or I should say, I hope people realize the opportunity that you're presenting them through syndicates racing. For 350 quid, you can have an equity share in what's looking like 3 breezers this year. The depth of understanding you will get from that €350 in terms of bang for your buck, it's going to be essentially unparalleled. So I think that best foot forward is what I would say. Don't apologize, or don't get bogged down in the narrative on welfare of those that aren't really interested in having a conversation. We need to debunk the whole elitism thing. The sport of kings. It might have been 200 years ago, but Jack, as you know, there's syndicates up and down the country, groups of friends from building sites, from golf clubs, from GA clubs, people who come together on Twitter and social media. The access is there, and I think we need to extol, just how accessible it is. And as I said, best foot forward. That's what I really think.
And Dan, I'd love to hear ideas about growing the game and think about it, because I actually had 3 different syndicate members that are involved in your syndicates to email me and say, look, what a great job you do about running syndicates within your organisation. I suppose touching upon the importance for you of syndicates and how people getting involved in that way, how important it is for you and Claire to run Kübler Racing together.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously as growing a business and you have sort of different levels of ownership and you know, we'd love to have Prince Carl Abdullah pick up the phone and say, look, here's 10 choicely bred yearlings. But realistically, you know, you need to bring in a decent number of horses, and different people can afford a different level of involvement. And you know, it's a fairly big part of what we do. And every year we go out and spec mostly yearlings, and most of those will be syndicated in some form. You know, sometimes we'll do them in groups of 4, 25%, or others we'll do in sort of 5 and 10%, and then we work with we've worked with Onto Winner in the past, and we work with an outfit called Crowd Racing who do much smaller shares, because at that stage the administration of the sort of the paperwork side of it is not really what we want to be focusing on, but we can still do a great job communicating to that group of people. And I think it is all about communication. We'd be very big on working together with owners, and communication being a very important part of what we do, and so that people can get involved and they do get a real insight into what's going on with their horse and the sort of what's involved with training a racehorse and developing it, and so they can follow that journey, I suppose.
And Rob, before someone takes a share in the horse, their likely first interaction with the sport of horse racing is they have a bet. And, I had an email from Alice Blake earlier, and she was talking about the relationship that we have betting and horse racing. Like, how do you feel that is as a bedfellow at the moment, and how do you think that's perceived in the wider sporting world?
I think it has problems, and I say that as somebody who, based my career out of working within the betting industry. I think it is a challenge because it's, people, I think possibly even more than the welfare issue, there's a slight discomfort with the social ramifications of gambling and betting, and the perception is worse than the reality. You can't rule out the fact that gambling does have social challenges around it, but for the most part, 99% of people will have a bet and will understand and will be able to have it, to win, to lose, to walk away, and look victory and defeat in equal measure. One of the things is, though, that it's like that debate on ITV, and it's like where John McCririck was back in the day, and it's where Matt Chapman is, and and Brian on RTE as well. We do tend to focus on the gambling and the betting. And, when Chemico went past the post yesterday, a 10-to-1 chance. And you kind of think, well, okay, but he's just won the 2,000 guineas as well. Is it really the most important thing that he is a 10-to-1 chance? And unfortunately, that probably yes is the answer to that at the moment. But it is within the control of the sport to actually, keep on pushing so that it's the sport as opposed to the betting that actually comes through. And one of the things that I certainly wouldn't say that that racing is completely should divorce itself in any way, shape, or form from betting. It was basically founded. The Derby was a match bet originally between Lord Derby and Lord Bunbury, and otherwise we'd be having the Bunbury at Epsom and the Curragh. We didn't, because his horse lost. It was a bet. There is that sense that it's part of the appeal. But if you look at and I know you did, because you were involved, Jack, in creating this, but the student race days, they're a little bit about the betting. They're a little bit about drinking. Well, they're probably a little bit more about drinking, but they're mostly about the social side of it, and the fashion and the dressing up, and and being there for for the excitement of it. I was at Leopardstown for the Dublin Racing Festival for the last couple of years. Absolutely brilliant, top class racing, proper education and proper engagement with what are really top class horses and jockeys. Rachel Blackmore performing really well and presenting herself really well out there, and like Dan, from a completely non-racing background, and people can identify with that as well, because they're not maybe always on the inside. So we shouldn't be bound by always bowing down to the betting side of it. It's the fun. And if betting is part of the fun of an occasion on a day out, Paddy Powers would say that they'd say, that's delighted. We don't want it to be all about betting. We want betting to be a part of it and a part of the overall experience. And I think that general sort of way in which we're actually presenting it as an occasion, as a day at the races, where you can go along with your friends, where you can meet other friends, where you can get an understanding of what's happening out there, and where you might be able to see a good horse, recognize that you've seen a good horse, and then follow it through to the next time around. Because like in sponsorship, it's never the first contact that's the most important, it's the renewal. And it's never the first moment that somebody gets involved in racing. It's what it does to them to make sure that they want to come back for a second and a third time are the most important things.
I think that's really, really interesting, Rob. And I think my metric for success, you touched upon the student race days. When I go to a student race day, what I'm heartened by, some people say to me, it's about the drink, it's about the dressing up, it's not about the racing. But actually, the biggest roar of the racing season isn't on Irish Champions Weekend. It isn't at the Irish Derby. It's actually at the student race days that we have up and down the country. And that's because they're watching the race, they're engaged with what's happening, and they want to see a winner. And I think that's a very valuable thing people need to take away from student race days. But Noel, and I turn to you. If I was to make you CEO of the BHA, you might turn that job down. It looks quite a difficult one. Or CEO of the Horse Racing Ireland in an amalgamated body, let's say. What would be kind of one or two, maybe three practical things you would do the very next day to transform horse racing in the best kind of most manageable ways you could?
Yeah, for me, it's start with the consumer, Jack, because whether we like it or not, our target audience is UK and Ireland. It's whatever demographic you pick, 18 plus, let's say, and horse racing is competing with the other mainstream sports out there. And what is the consumer experience when watching other sports? So we've kind of touched on that. What is the expectations? What is the information path? So start with consumer, and you cannot give them a diminished experience when they watch horse racing versus when they watch soccer or cricket or golf or whatever it happens to be. And at the moment, we're asking consumers to accept a diminished experience. So that would for me would be first and foremost. I think there is a Ballinrobe racecourse, for me, is one of the great case studies in Ireland. It's under John Flannelly has grown itself quite significantly in the last number of years. And John put a good committee in place, and he said about making sure that every race was sponsored. And he probably drew a circle of probably 35 or 40 miles around the racetrack, went out and got good, strong committee members, got good, strong sponsorship. And when he had that sponsorship, he made sure that the sponsor engaged and activated that sponsorship as well. Give out lots of tickets and get people racing and have them enjoying a day at the races. So that helps to bring them there. But I think, for then going back to how we market the racing, I suppose, is speak to consumers like intellects. Don't dumb it down. I mean, we all remember, I think it was 2016 Champions Day, the post-racing press release from Leopardstown after 2016's Champions Day. The first two paragraphs laid with the fact that Rachel Wise had been the judge for the best dressed lady that day. And, the winner of the Champion Stakes and the other Group 1 races on the day got second billing to that. That's not appropriate for the marketing of horse racing, in my view, at least. So understand that we are a sport that provides access to its participants. Understand that we are a sport that at which people can have great fun, but also understand that we are greatly challenged at the moment by other sports. A lot of that is got to do with the media model, but we need to benchmark the consumer experience with other sports, and racing needs to come in line with that. I mean, you talked about the jockey cameras, for example, and like the reality is that jockey cams are probably about the only innovation that has happened in racing in the last number of years, and we don't seem to have really moved forward from that. But Jack, as owners, as you and me as owners, if Syndicates Racing has a winner this Friday, wherever racing is on, you're not allowed to use the video footage of your horse that you've paid for and originated to promote your product, promote Syndicates Racing. So we've no rights. As owners, we're paying the bills to provide you know, to provide the product, but then after the fact, we're kind of forgotten about. So if you put a video up on your website, Racing TV could come along and say, you have no rights to do that, and you need to remove it. So how is the owners aren't enabled to promote racing themselves, which I think is a bit of a misstep. I don't quite know how you would solve that for what it's worth, but you know, owners are the biggest advocates of racing that we have. You know, I think if you said to me, what should the people watching this do tomorrow when it comes to horse racing, I would say the next time you're going racing, bring somebody with you that's never gone before, and take the time to bring them through the day and explain the day to them. You know, if you bump into a jockey or a trainer, stop and introduce them and say, "This is your friend. This is their first day racing." But activate the mind. You know, create the interest, and I think the product itself stands on its own 2 feet really after that.
I think that's really interesting, Noel. And Dan, you were once upon a time that person that had never been racing before. You'd been brought along by a friend or a family member, and you were going for the first time. You talked about how terrestrial television was your initial insight into the game, watching Grandstand. And like, I'm interested, Peter Appleton has put it to us here in our Q&A that he says he can't agree with the panel. He says they're getting rather technical and introspective with racing. And when he has conversations with people outside the sport, they reveal that they find it confusing and complicated, and that's barriers to entry for them. How do you balance not dumbing it down, but also bringing people into the sport like Peter is suggesting?
I think, you know, the essence of a horse race is about as simple as it gets. You know, which horse gets from A to B the fastest? I think where we get ourselves in trouble with racing is we often shroud it in language that isn't accessible to the general public. You know, we talk about furlongs, we talk about handicaps, we talk about, and all of that is a little bit sort of barren to, or not barren's the wrong word, but not necessarily very accessible to someone who's never been to the races before. So I think what someone coming to the races for the first time does is they want to know, well, why is my race card saying that that's a 5-star chance and that's a 2-star chance in language that I can understand? Because, you know, that's how invariably, you know, we quite often, you know, will take owners and then they'll bring friends who maybe don't go racing very often, and you're sat there at the races and they'll sort of look at you as an expert and sort of basically ask you for a tip. You know, what's going to win the first race? You know, we're in the 4th race, and you'll explain to them, and most people can understand it quite quickly once you say, oh well, a maiden's for horses that haven't won, or, you know, after horses have run a few times, they all get given a rating, and then so they can run on, you know, roughly level footing. So then we look at things like draw, and it's all actually quite simple. But how do we, as a sport, I think the challenge is that we have to get that message across to those people who are there for the first time, but also engage the person who comes regularly to keep them interested. And I wonder, there's been a lot putting into, I wrote something down when I sort of looked through all of this, and it touches on many things that people have raised, but I think we need to focus, I think that's a good point, focus on what our audience is and stop trying to be all things to all people all the time. You know, we aren't going to get 50% of the population loving racing. Let's concentrate on the 5% who are really going to be into it and follow it regularly, and give them something that they can really enjoy, instead of always trying to bring in, you know, as a business, your repeat customer is much more important to retain your customers and have repeat customers than it is to, and much cheaper than to continuously go out and find a new customer every time. And I think that's something that perhaps racing loses, you know. And I think, you know, one of the criticisms of terrestrial coverage is that it tries to be too many things to too many people, instead of just saying, you know, let's focus on this and attract this group of people so that they tune in every Saturday, you know, if that's what it is. And then the racing channels can be even more detailed, because then they've got an even more focused audience. And I think the correspondent, he made a really good point. I mean, I think certainly in the UK, the York really do a fantastic job as a race course. You know,
I have to stop you there because he actually sent 2 messages, and his second message was, William Darby, CEO, York, gets the balance right, good racing, relevant education for racegoers, fantastic value for money and inclusivity. So I don't know if he's an alias for you, Dan, but he certainly is.
That's what I picked the point, because he...
Oh, you thought, okay, fine, yeah, great.
And that extends to, as horsemen, his engagement with horsemen is brilliant. He's come down to our yard and he said, like, when you bring a horse to York, what are your concerns? What do you want from us? And there isn't a better place to take a horse racing in the country than York, from a horseman's perspective. Everything is thought of. And that's the kind of proactivity that you'd like to see more courses taking.
I think that's really interesting, Dan. And I think what I'd like to do now is turn it on everyone watching in tonight and launch our poll. And what our poll is where would you invest for the future in horse racing? So is it in increased prize money? Would you support syndicates? Would you like better value on course like York have done? Reduce the attendance cost? Free-to-air televised races, perhaps? We've seen that Dan got his interest from Grandstand. Animal welfare, research and development. We've talked about the importance of welfare in this industry. Or is it that we need to reach out to a new generation? We need the creation of social media content. So if you want to vote at a panel right now, I'd love to see where we land on this.
I voted already, Jack.
Well done. Yeah. So we've everyone joining us in tonight. So we've loads of different people all around the world voting on this. And I'm going to close it down in 5 seconds. Let's have a look. So they would support syndicates. That's where they say the future of racing. They would like to see more support for getting people involved. Noel has touched upon the accessibility of being involved in syndicates, that opens up the sport for people. And, I'd like to turn now to kind of the questions that people have. And Noel, I suppose my first one for you is, last year you had Sunday Sovereign. You bought it for €30,000, and it turned into a fantastic victory at the Curragh, and then you sold that horse on. And that's a remarkable journey for people, because they've bought in at that horse and seen it develop from a yearling, and then they've had a financially lucrative return on the other end. Are we doing too little to explain the bloodstock element before, as part of this puzzle that we're trying to convey to the wider public? Do we not do enough with bloodstock?
I don't know. I think that's a bit of a challenge, Jack, because everybody gets involved in racing for different reasons. Some people want to get involved in racing because they want a day out with their friends. You could draw parallels with maybe a golf club membership, for example. Some people get involved because they want winners. So winning is important. Some people get involved because they want to flip it on the bloodstock side. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that we over-index on explaining the bloodstock or the commercial element of it. But what I would say is I would come 2 steps back and say, explain everything in turn. Make sure that there's a good system in place to explain all aspects and to make it feel like all aspects of it are accessible, without necessarily saying, oh, for the next 6 months, we're going to focus exclusively on bloodstock or betting or whatever it happened to be. I just think that we need a very holistic approach to it, because, again, go back to kind of what I would have said at the start, treat the consumers as intellects. They have the bandwidth to understand all of this. All that's required is that somebody takes the time to explain it to them and bring them on the journey, bring them on that journey of understanding.
And Rob, we talk about that journey of understanding, and you're doing it for brands. You talked about, you helped William Fry, and they're big sponsors on at Leopardstown. And when you're trying to do a brand activation, you're trying to, and Noel talked about how Ballinrobe have done it successfully in promoting, getting as many sponsors in as possible. How can sponsorship of horse races, we have Compass Stallions, they're kindly, Anglesey Lodge, they're all supporting tomorrow at Naas Racecourse. What do you say in terms of advice to get the most out of horse racing from a business perspective?
I think you have to sell it on its strengths. The strengths, what any business wants to do now. Admittedly, this is in a social context, which we're not going to have for at least a couple of months anyway. But horse racing, it happens in short, sharp bursts, and then in between times, you've got an opportunity to talk to your customers or to your friends or to go for a drink or to do other things. If you go to the Aviva Stadium or if you go to Croke Park, you're there, maybe 10 minutes before the start of the game. You've got 15 minutes at half time. You need to go to the loo. You need to pick up a cup of tea or a hot dog or something like that. Racing gives you far more opportunities to actually connect and to contact. But I think the first thing, the most important thing in terms of reaching out to any business is that you need to have a champion for the sport within that business as well. And we've come back to this theme every now and again of, making sure that we focus on the people who will give us the most return for our buck. Last year's attendance figures at Irish racecourses, and I know it'll be very depressing now when we look at this number for 2020, but last year, 1.3 million people that came through, now not individuals, but 1.3 million racecourse visits over the course of the year. How many of those people, do we actually communicate with and talk to? My business is about communication. I produce a daily news digest. It goes out to about 4,000 people every single morning. And I know what I'm talking about in terms of it being about the commercial side of sport. If we can communicate better using the data which technology has given us now, with the people who have booked tickets, with the people who have actually engaged in a social media competition, with the people who have expressed some degree of interest, we could spend fortunes on trying to reach out to people who will never, ever go racing, who will never, ever turn on the television and actually want to see jockeys getting on board a horse before a horse race. But if we can focus, if we can talk to the people who know what to expect from us as a sport in terms of that, educate them. We've spoken, Noel, you spoke about how we're competing with other sports. I don't think we're competing with other sport at all. I think we're competing with other leisure activities. I think we're competing with a night out at the cinema. One of the greatest benefits that horse racing has is that we allow kids in for free. So if you're a hard-pressed family on a middle income and you're looking for something to actually entertain and engage the kids, you pay for the kids to go to the zoo, you pay for them to go to the cinema, you don't pay for them to go to the races. So bring them to the races and tell them about it. Tell their parents about it, get the kids along, show them a really good time out there. All of these things that can actually work, but we have to communicate strongly about just how great a sport it is. Don't be afraid, don't dumb it down, don't explain, oh, well, a jockey has to put his feet in the stirrups in order to help to steer the horse. It's like, as Noel said, I think it was Noel that said about, explaining what a corner kick was to a football audience. Move beyond that, treat our customers with a sense of intelligence and they will come with you. Don't be afraid of it.
That's really, really interesting to hear, Rob. And we've 5 minutes to go. And I've one more question for you, Rob. And it's a really important topic, I feel. And I think it's an inherent advantage for racing, and that's gender. I think we're attractive to both genders, and I think we've great success stories amongst women in our sport. You think of Michael Michel, she's a sensation in Japan. She's hugely successful in France. We've Rachel Blackmore. We had Jessie Harrington today with the favourite. Fortunately didn't win, but the favourite in the 1,000 guineas. And we've seen in Ireland the great success of 20 by 20, a promise that we're going to have 20% more coverage of women in sport in Ireland, and we're going to do that by engaging with media organisations. When you reflect upon sport and how to get people involved, do you think that's an angle for horse racing in Ireland and in Britain, that we can get more people enthusiastic about our sport?
To a huge degree. Your own mother and Clodagh Kavanagh, in terms of Godolphin, the racing star, have been looking at this and really sort of doing some good groundwork in terms of actually getting, the story out about the success of women. It's one of the very few sports, in fact, possibly one of the only sports where Rachel Blackmore can go out there and compete against the very best of jockeys in the very best of arenas and go in there with a winning chance. If you think back over the last couple of years, it was T.G. Cahir produced 2 documentaries about jockeys where they were following the story of jockeys and getting, underneath the hood of what it's like to be. And then they had, the women jockeys that they were following as well. Those kind of pieces of content, of reaching out there, they help people to actually understand it. And they're being watched by young girls, and they're being watched by mothers, and they're being watched by aunties, as well as by men as well. And they're watching it because that's what they're watching television as a family, as a group. If they can be shown content which actually helps to demystify, helps to explain, and helps to, in a sense, romanticize what the sport is all about, and to see themselves as having an equal opportunity of getting there, that'll be brilliant. Again, RTE did a brilliant documentary about the Blues Sisters, about the Dublin ladies football team, And it is not accidental, the fact that the attendance at the All-Ireland Ladies Football Final has soared while the Dublin team has been there, because people feel as though they know them from having seen a television documentary. More people will understand and know about the National Basketball Association because of watching Michael Jordan and The Last Dance on television. You can't tell me that we don't have those kind of stories, whether it be from a horse perspective or whether it be from, you know, a documentary series following Willie Mullins when he goes out to weigh his horses, when he goes out to scope his horses, when he goes to the races. You know, get underneath it, give people entertainment around the sport as well. And yes, by all means, that focus on women. Like I sit on the committee for 20 by 20, and it has been absolutely brilliant. And Rachel Blackmore has been involved to an extent in that. You know, and don't downplay as well the style side of it and the fashion side of it. I do love the fact that we've got best dressed man as well as best dressed women now, but the number of entries that are going into the competitions tend to be higher for the best dressed women, because most of us, you know, aren't quite as attuned into the fashion. The younger generation is, though, and you can bet your life that it's the fellas in the sharp suits and the, you know, and the waistcoats and everything like that, walking up from Stillorgan up into Leopardstown that you notice on the student race days. So, you know, by all means, like, you know, there's a connection between bringing people together socially, and that appeals across both genders. So yes, play it. It's much more important.
I personally think those judges of the best dressed men are blind, because I've never been picked out for one of them. But apart from that, great flaw. We've only got 2 minutes here, so two quick fire questions to Dan and to Noel. Dan, if I could start with you, and it's from one of our attendees, they've asked, how can we best utilise the time between races to keep newer visitors to the track engaged? So you're there on a day of the races, how can you keep them engaged? 30 seconds to you. What would you do?
I think getting people around the paddock, especially the pre-parade ring, great chance to view horses, see them up and close and personal. That's something that I think anyone who goes racing for the first time should really go and do, is get down to the paddock and see the horses. I think that's it. And then, you know, look, it's time to have a bit of fun. The one advantage racing has got as a sort of entertainment type sport, as opposed to going to a football match with someone, is you've got the time to socialise between the race. You know, if you go with a client or a friend or whatever, you know, you've got a bit of action, which gives you something to talk about, but then you've also got probably 20, 25 minutes where you can sit and have a chat about whatever. And that creates a much more social environment than going to a football match where you maybe get 15 minutes at half time. 30 seconds.
Noel, final question to you, and that is, you know, you've given your examples of what you do in terms of you are in charge of Irish racing. If you could have one thing, though, you change, you know, we have this great opportunity with these nightly shows. What would you like to see in those nightly shows? And just to let people know, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday on RTE, they're going to have a 1 hour evening show about horse racing. This is a great opportunity for our sport. What would you do with that show? One thing.
Quite simple, Jack. I would tell people why something is happening and not tell them what has happened. Anybody who tunes in can see what has happened. The story needs to be why something has happened. The what is not interesting, the why is interesting, and it is stimulating and it is engaging. So an example being a jockey switched his whip from left to right, or a jockey changed his hands inside the final furlong. Don't say that he did do, or don't say that the horse has switched his legs. Explain why he has done that, because that's far more engaging. The why stimulates the mind, the what is mundane and is past tense.
Okay, brilliant, Noel. Well, thank you very much, and thank you to all our panelists tonight. And, you know, the why, what would you do? We would love to hear from you. I'd love if you tweeted me, let me know what you thought of tonight. Let me know your ideas. Just hit my Twitter account there. Would love to hear. It's all about a conversation. If you're watching on YouTube, please comment below. I'd love to hear your suggestions of how you get more people involved in the sport. Next week, we're going to talk about how to stand the stallion. We're going to become multi-millionaires and stand the stallion, which is very, very exciting. And the week after, we have our racing book club, which is The Horse Trader about Robert Sangster, my favorite racing book, and I'm sure a few of our panelists have read that book. A real terrific read. You can get it, support your local bookstore, and if you can't, it's available on Kindle, but please try and support your local bookstore. And if you haven't already, of course, you have our bargain breezer. Go to syndicates.racing. Noel touched upon it earlier. We're really excited to do that now in the coming weeks. That's going to be a great platform to get engaged in this great sport and get people with runners in 2020. Thank you very much to everyone that joined tonight. Thank you to everyone watching on YouTube, and see you next week.